Elias Makos on CJAD 800.
YouTube pranks can be all fun and games. That's until they turn into charges and arrests. See this story last week? Montrealers given a call to 911 because they saw people being kidnapped and stuffed into the trunks of cars. Turned out to be some YouTube pranksters that were trying to get their next big hit on YouTube. With more on this, let's go to Ashkan Karbafarushan. He's founder of Watch Mojo, tens of millions of subscribers on YouTube, and based right here in Montreal. Ash, how you doing?
Very good.
I want to ask you first off, when you see this story of, three Montrealers that, caused quite the ruckus and the police had to get involved because they were, staging kidnappings on the street. To me, what comes to my head, top of mind, is there must be enormous pressure if you're trying to make a living on YouTube to quickly ramp up, get those subscribers, and start to see dollars come in. Can you go through that economic process on YouTube? Why do pranksters need to do these things?
Sure. I mean, at a higher level, I think it's just that YouTube has gone from being this, new thing 15 years ago to being basically the new television. Mm-hmm. So indeed, there's a lot of clutter and competition for attention, and that attention and market share has a currency. Why? Because YouTube is part of Google, which is an ad-supported platform. So what's happening is, this democratization of media that started about 20, 30 years ago, it's accelerated. There are no barriers to entry. So these people have to one-up each other, right? If you look at the evolution of media, we talk about Watch Mojo doing top 10s. Well, that's kind of like the new way of the way Dave Letterman or, Moses and the Ten Commandments or Wayne's World used to cover top 10s. You've seen pranks on TV, right, to Just for Laughs gags. You've seen Candid Camera in the States. But those were tame compared to what some of these pranksters do on YouTube to get, more and more outrageous, to stand out. And then occasionally they cross the line.
Can YouTube do something with the economics to stop that from happening? Or is this, it is what it is, and there's no way of stopping it?
No, they can. To their credit, YouTube has evolved, right? They used to be very much laissez-faire, free-for-all. We're just a platform. We're not a publisher. We don't want to have any editorial oversight. I think they've realized that wild, wild west is years gone by, especially, politicians now talking about monopolies and antitrust and responsibility. YouTube, to their credit, have tried to get ahead of this and remove that incentive for people to do things like the Tide Pod Challenge, where admittedly the chief marketing officer of Procter & Gamble reached out to the CEO, Susan Wojcicki, at YouTube and said, Susan, we can't have this. We can't have our brand associated to a prank challenge that ultimately harms people. And then YouTube scaled back. So because of the pressure, and I won't lie, YouTube ultimately they're good individuals working there, but it's a business. It's more when there's pressure from the advertisers that say, hey, we don't want to associate ourselves with this, that they do act. But it's impossible because YouTube executives are human. They don't wake up thinking, how is a 13 or 14-year-old who has been brought up in this era of 24/7 connectivity where consumers are not just consuming content, but they're curating content and creating content, how are they going to think? So unfortunately, they're always reacting, and that's what you're seeing here.
Can I ask you, Ash, for your company, for Watch Mojo, do you face, obviously you're successful, right? You've got subscribers, but do you ever find that you face that same type of pressure of dealing with an algorithm change and trying to follow that where you may do content you normally wouldn't want to do?
Fantastic question. I would be a big liar if I came here that as a human being, you're not always tempted between good and evil and fear and greed. So look, even when we were early challenger, scrappy startup, we still tried to not go over that line and really kind of asked ourselves, do we want to do this? Are we going to be proud of this in a year or two? And so we're big and we're successful, but we're not Google size because we made those decisions to kind of stay on the right side, so to speak. But that is a temptation that many have. I would say this about the algorithm. Watch Mojo's success wasn't because we kind of were overthinking the algorithm and wanted to react to it. If anything, we always made good common sense decisions that kind of took into consideration many stakeholders, viewers, advertisers, community, employees, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say because of those good decisions, we were kind of rewarded by the algorithm, so to speak. One thing that I constantly internally tell my team is let's not get frozen and want to kind of be placated to play to yesterday's playbook. Let's keep making those good decisions that make sense to our viewers, that make sense to advertisers, and then we will keep benefiting. And that's a cultural challenge because as you grow, you hire a very different profile of employees. But all to say, we don't pretend to be better than people, but we make a valid, decision every day to not cross certain lines. But unfortunately, you are right that there is an economic incentive to go crazy and do these pranks and push the envelope. And it does lead to tragedy, right? In 2018 in Minnesota, Mona Lisa Perez, a 22-year-old YouTuber, shot and killed her boyfriend and father of her kids, Pedro Ruiz, because she shot him, but he had a book in his chest, and they thought that would block the bullet. Tragically, it didn't.
Wow.
It was and it was just shock. And so when YouTube hears that, they obviously, to their credit, want to kind of change the rules of engagement. But again, it's always reactive because it's ultimately human beings. A lot of people, they are driven by fame and greed and whatnot. And I think it's just manifesting there. Now, this is also just a reflection. I'm 42. I got 2 kids. Look, when I was in high school, there was a kid who would light a shoe in the basement, and I was like, man, this is not going to end well. But it's kids being kids, and it's not good.
Now it goes on to YouTube, Ash. Right?
Exactly.
Ash, we got to leave it there, man. But I want to thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.